authentication to the API resources. So to do so, we will start by adding the authentication APIs. So here is where I'm going to start off. Okay, so the first thing, so it will be authentication routes. Okay, and here we need to start with the register route, but to do so we need to create a controller that will be used for authentication. So let's create that controller here. So I'm going to run php artisan make controller, but here we are not going to create an API controller, so it will be auth controller. Okay, so we will not give the API flag. Okay, so remove that, so it will be this way. So this should create a new controller which is called the auth controller. Okay, so you can see there is a new controller that has been created. So now let's visit that controller. So this is our new class, which is our controller, and here is where we are going to perform all the functionalities for registration and login. Okay, so here means that we are going to have the following routes. So we are going to have the register auth. So this should be a post method, and it should be called the register, and this should be coming from auth controller. And from auth controller we are going to define a method called the register, and same way for login. So we are just going to change this be login. Okay, so in a minute I'm going to show you how to create these methods. So this one will be used to create our user, and then this one will be used to log in our user so that they can be able to use and to utilize our APIs. So at next step we are going to see how we are going to protect these routes from unauthenticated or unauthorized users. Okay, so now the next step is to go into our resource and let's start to create the registration method. Okay, so here let's create the register method for registering our user. Okay, so we are going to say public function register. Okay, and in this method we are going to create a new variable called the validated, which will store our validated data. And then after this I'll show you how to separate this into a separate request as we did for other controllers. So for now let's just do this. So we're going to have the request. So here we need to pass the request because this will be coming from our user, so this should be a request. So here from request we are going to call the validate method, validate, and inside that validate method is where we are going to put our rules. Okay, so here we are going to make sure that the name is required, and we are calling this field from the user model. So if you go to user model, you see that we have the name, email, and password. Okay, so here we are going to say the name should be required. It should be a string. It should be, let's say, maximum can be 255, and then we have email. So this should be email, and you can make that to be required, and you can make sure that this is the string. Also we can make sure that it is an email, and then after that we can say it should be unique on users table. Then you are going to check for email, okay? And then we are going to have the password, which you should make sure that it is required. It is a string, and we can make sure that for minimum it can be, let's say, 4 characters, but you can put a strong so that you can, let's say, up to 8 to be minimum. But for this, I'll just put let's put an 8 again, and I believe that is fine. And here we should make sure that it is confirmed, okay? So means that the user should re-enter password. So they will enter the first password, and then they will be asked to re-enter the same password, okay? After that, now is where we are going to create our new user. So we're going to say user. Then we are going to get that user from the user model. Then we are going to call the create method, okay? And from that create method, we are going to have the following. So let's import this one. So here we are going to have the name, and this should be corresponding to validated. Then from the validated array, we are going to retrieve the name. Then we are going to do the same thing for email and the password, okay? But the difference in password here, let me just complete here on email. Then the difference here is that we want to make sure that the password is hashed, so that we can be able to get the hashed password as it should be stored in your Laravel database, okay? So here we need to put the following method. So I'm going to call that make, but this should be coming from hash, like that way. So now let's import this hash. Okay, so make sure that you have imported this facade, and then this should be a good start for you to be able to create a user. But after that, we are going to generate the token. Okay, so this token will be the token that is usable for authorization. So we want to authorize the user so that they can be able to access anything on our API endpoints. So we are going to use these API tokens to do that. Okay, so here we are going to create a new variable called token, and then we are going to call user. Then from the user instance, we are going to say create token. So that is the method, and then inside it you can see it accepts the name of the token, and then there is an array of abilities. So if you don't put anything, means that the user will have all the abilities. So you can be able to change that if you want, but for the sake of our video, I'll just leave that blank so that the user can have all the abilities. So maybe in the next video I'll show you how to update this so that you can be able to give a certain token some abilities and a certain token the full abilities. So for now, let's just give the name here. So I can just say auth token, okay? And then from that token that we have created, I just want to get the plain text token, okay? So after that is where we are going to return the response. So we are going to return a response, okay, and which will be in a JSON format, where we are going to return, let's say, a success of being true. Then we are going to return the user, okay. You can just return the user like this way, but because we started by using the resources, so means we need to create the user resource. But for now, let me just put it that way. And here we want to show the token, okay? So we want to return the token for that particular user, okay? So we can just return that way. And here you can pass the status code if you want, but for now, just leave it that way, okay? So If you want to use the resource here, means we need to create a new resource. So let's create that for the sake of transforming our data. So PHP @ make resource, and the name of the resource will be user resource. Okay, so from user resource here, we are going to update this one so that we can return an array that will be helping us to transform the details of our user. So what we are going to do here is to, let's say, return the name, and we are going to say, let's say we want to capitalize the data. So what we are going to say is this, then the name of the user. So after the name, we are going to return the email, password. Basically, you may not return the password because that is not a good practice. So we can just return the name and the email. After that means we need to use that resource here. So to use that means we are going to say new, then user resource, and then here we're going to pass the user. Okay. So after that means we are going to have the user that is transformed here. So we want to change that, but on email we don't need this. So we can just return just a plain email. So this should be email. Okay. So that way. So now let's go back here, and this will be a good start for our authentication. So now let's try and see if the user can be created. Okay, so let's go back here, and from here I'm going to create a new folder or directory, and from that new directory I'm going to call it authentication. Inside it is where I'm going to create my new request, which should be a post method, and from it I'm going to call the register URL that we registered on our api.php file here. So I'm going to call this one, which is this one, and then make sure that this is a post method. Okay, make sure it accepts application JSON. Okay, and then after that we need to pass the parameters, because it will require us to pass the parameters. So the first parameter should be a name, then we should have the email, and we should have the password. Okay, and then we should have the password confirmation. Okay, that way. So now let's try to send that and see if the validation works. Yeah, so you can see the name field is required, email field is required, and password is required. So now let's try to create our first user. So for example, I can create a sample user, let's say Shadrach JM, then I can say Shadrach at example.com, then the password, I can just put password, then I should type the password that way, and now let's try to send that request. Yeah, so you can see the success is true. You can see the user, so you see the name and the email, and you can see the name has been capitalized. So you will try this to be in small letter, and we want to see how it will look like. Okay, so for now, if we try to resend again, it will give us a validation error because this should be unique. So if we try again, you see the email has already been taken. Okay, but if we try to create another user, so for example, if we create test2 user, and let's say test2 at example.com, so this is the name, and now let's try to send that request. Yeah, so you can see the name has been capitalized, so the first letter is capitalized. So that is the transformation by using our resource here. So you can see this is how easy you can just do that. But here we've been successful to be able to create our user, and here you can see we have the token. So this is the token that will help you to be able to access all the API endpoints that we are going to restrict them to only the authorized user to be able to access them. So for now, we've been able to create our users. So now let's try to log in our users so that they can be able to access a certain URL. But for now, we can be able to access anything because we have the token. It means that we are authenticated. So let's create another one for login. So let's perform the login functionality on our controller here. So let's say for login, so we are going to have the public function login. As usual, we are going to pass the request here, and we are going to return the following. So as we did before, we need to have the, let's say, from here we're just going to validate it directly. So validate, then we are going to validate the fields. That will be the name. We should make sure that the name is required. Okay, then we should make sure it is the email. Oh, this should be an email because the user logged in by using the email, okay, as the username. And then we have the password here. So password, and we should make sure that this is required that way, okay. And then after that, we need to authenticate, get the first user that have this email, okay. So here, get the user with that email if exists. So let's check that. So we're going to say user, then you get that first user where email equals to the email from the request, okay. So email from the request, and then we are going to get the first user, okay. And then after that, we are going to check if that user password is the same as this password that the user has entered. So to check that means we have to decide to decrypt the password from the database and compare it with this password. And if this will be true, means that that password is correct. So the credentials are correct. So you can use any way to validate that, but I believe this is the simplest way. So we are going to check if it's not the user, or if the hash, then check. So this check means it have the value and the hashed value. So the value will be the value from the request. So we are going to pass the request, then password. Then the second parameter should be the hashed password. So the hashed password will be the password that is coming from the user, okay. So password that way. So means that this check will check the entered password which is coming from the request. It will compare with the password that was hashed and stored in database. So it will decrypt this one and compare it with this one. So if it will be true, means that this check will return it true. But here we are checking if it's not the user, and or if this is not true. So if that is not true, means that this is not the valid user. So we need to return a message. So we are going just to return response in JSON format, and we are going to let the user know that, let's say, credentials, let's say message, then the message should be the credentials not, let's say, these credentials are incorrect. Okay, that way. And now, if that's not the case, means that this is not true. Okay, means that that user is our user. So we are going to get the token, which will be coming from the user, which is this user. Okay, and we are going to say create token. The name of the token will be the same, so I'll just keep it consistent to be authentication token, and then I'm going to get the plain text token. Okay, and then after that we are going to return that user. Okay, in response JSON. So let's say success true, then user, then we can return the user in user resource. Okay, then a token, then you pass the token. Okay, that way, and then you terminate there. Okay, so by doing so means that now we can be able to to log in our user. Okay, so if you want to check this again, you can just make sure that your login logic is as what I have here. Okay, so now let's go here and create a new request, which will be login. So it will be login, and then this should be here. We don't have the password, so let me just remove this password confirmation, also the name. Okay, so we have something like this. Okay, so we want to test it for the first user, so I just want to update this one. So let me change that to be that one. So this is the first user's email. So now let's try to log in. Okay, so we didn't accept the application JSON. That's why we don't see anything, because the response is returned in the JSON format. So now let's try again. Okay, so here we see that, oh, so this we didn't change here. So this should be login. Make sure that you change that. And now let's try to send that request again. Yeah, so you can see this is true, and here we have the token. Okay, so that's working fine. So the next thing will be to be able to add authentication or authorization to other routes. So to do so, what we are going to do is to make sure that, for example, the simplest way will be to, for example, to create a group. So we can just say group, then we can say, let's say middleware, and then from that middleware we are going to pass the auth center. So this is the name of the middleware that we are going to use to check, and here we are going to use the group, and from that group we are going to pass down the closure, which is our callback function, and then inside here is where we are going to pass all of these URLs. So for example, for now, for testing, I'll pass only the authors. Okay, so now means that if we try to access these authors with the user without adding the token or the authorization, we will not be able to get any of these details. So let me just show you in action. So here on authors, we have this one for getting all authors. We have this endpoint, which is this one. So here we didn't add anything concerning with the authentication. So let's accept the application JSON. Okay, so we don't have anything on authorization. I don't have anything. Okay, so now if I try to send this request again here, see, I get the error message which is saying unauthenticated. You see, so means that we cannot be able to see anything concerning with the authors. Why? Because we have added this one inside this middleware which is called the auth sanctum. So this is the middleware that is coming with sanctum. As I told you before, that we are using this sanctum to authenticate and authorize our users in our Laravel APIs. So this is the simplest way that you can add authorization. So it means that now, in order for your users to be able to access these authors, they should provide the token. So that token will be used to authorize them. So the application will understand that if the user has the token, it means this is the right and authorized user to be able to access this resource. Okay. So to do so means that we can copy the token from login here. So let's copy that and let's go back to get authors. So you need to add here on authorization. Then because that is the BR token, so we are going to use the BR token. And here, make sure you remove the token and paste the token that you copied. So you can see this is the token. See, so it has the number 3 here. So that is the right token. Okay, so we can toggle that. You can just show it or hide it. Okay, so now you see the first time we get this message. So now let's try again. You see, now we were able to access. So if now I just remove this one like this way and try to send again, you see, unauthenticated. But if I apply the BR token, which is our token, and send, you see, I was able to get the authors. So this is just the simplest way you can add authentication to your APIs. So now means that all of these methods or URLs or API endpoints, you can call them whatever way that fits you. So we need to make sure that all falls in the group of this middleware, which is auth center. So this is the middleware that will be checking if that user has provided the right token. Okay, so that was the token that we are generating here. So by using this one or here. So that's how easy you can just do that. So the register and login method or endpoints, this will be global. So means that we don't need to put them inside the authentication sanctum middleware. Okay, so that will be there. But now if you try to get the user, so here this is the default route that was coming with API when you just install sanctum. So this will be by default. But if you want to get, let's say, the details of the logged in user, you can just do the following. So on the authentication controller here, we can just create a new method. So let's come here. So let's say get authenticated user. Okay, so we can just create a new public function which will be called the user, and make sure it passes the request here. Okay, and here we are just going to return the user resource. Okay, but inside it we are going to pass the request, then user. Okay, so it means that we are going to get the user that is sending the request, and we are going to return that as the authenticated user. So because we believe that this will only be accessible to the user that they are authorized. So that's why we are able to just return the user that is sending the request. So here is where we are going to define that route. So we are going to say route get, then user. Then inside here is where we are going to say this comes from the auth controller. and the method that is providing that is called the user. Okay, so that way. So this is the simplest way that you can do this, but the functionality that we are doing here is similar to this one, because when you see this, it is just passing the request as a parameter, and then here from the request you are getting the authenticated user. So it's the similar thing, and you see it is applied on the middleware. So it's the similar thing that we are doing here. So I've just changed that from this one to this one. Okay, so you can add the / there, and it will not affect anything. So if now we try to visit this link and provide the correct token, now we should be able to see the authenticated user. So let me try that. So here let's create another route inside the auth, and let's call it get user. So let's call the user, and this is the get method here. And now let's try to add the application JSON. After that, now let's try to send that request, and you can see an authenticated. So if we provide the correct BR token here, so add that and send the request, because this is the perfect, it was cached, so it will be the same. So if we try to send again, you see we are getting the details of the authenticated user. Okay, so that is how easy you can just do that. But also you can add the functionality for your users to be logged out. So on your application that is utilizing these APIs, they should be able to log out from that application. So it means that it will be calling this function that we are creating now. So let's call it logout, and it is passing the request here, then request, and after that we are going to say request, then user, then we are going to say current access token, then we are going to delete the current access token. So by deleting the current access token means that that user will not be able to access any of the resources on your application. So we are going to return a response and notify the user that they were able to log out successful. Okay, so here we're going to say, let's say success true. So message is logged, let's say logged out successfully. Okay, that way. Okay, so now let's try to add that here, because that will be only accessible by the authenticated users. So this should be logout, and it should be calling the logout method. Okay, so make sure this is the method that you have defined here. Okay, so it should be the same with this one. Here you can just put anything else, but here make sure that it is the same method that is found on your controller. Okay, so now let's try to log out. So first let's remove this, let's create another request here, and basically this should be a post request. Okay, this should be a post request. Okay, and here let's update that to be post, and then let's apply that, send it back to that, and let's change this to be logout. Okay, logout. Okay, let's accept the application JSON. Okay, after that, now on authorization, let's not put anything, and now let's try to send the request. So you can see unauthenticated, and if we try to apply the BR token, which is a caged token, now let's send. You see, so the success is true and the user is logged out. So now if we try again to get that user by using the similar token, so let's try again to send that request. You see, unauthenticated. It means that this token now is invalid because it will be already deleted as we did on our code here. So we have just deleted that token. So that token is not available on our database. So means that the user is not valid again. They should log in and then they will be issuing the new token. So from that token is where they can be able to be authorized to access anything else from our API endpoints. So that was the all the things that I want to show you concerning with authentication and authorization on your Laravel API. So now the next step will be to add the API versioning.